All right. Safeguarding elections. I'm going to read this one to you guys because I thought this was fascinating. I hadn't heard about this. Guatemala recently used the Bitcoin blockchain to safeguard all of the official vote tally sheet images. I had not heard about this.
Yeah, so there's always been an interesting narrative around putting arbitrary data on the Bitcoin blockchain and using it as a source of truth. Because if you can hash data into the blockchain and then verify that this piece of data was in this block, you know it existed at least this time.
Right.
And so it can provide a form of document verification that's quite interesting. And of course, Peter Todd and his open timestamps protocol has been I think one of the first proof of concepts. And I've used open timestamps myself. It's very approachable. And now we finally see, in a moment of increasing distrust in institutions and scrutiny of their actions, election results being put into the blockchain.
That seems like a whole other level. So let's give them a welcome, because I think it's going to be a fascinating talk. So give them a round of applause. Are you guys ready? You ready?
Yeah.
All right, let's give them a round of applause.
Okay, we've got Rafael and Peter. Thank you.
Clicker. Wait.
Well, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Self-defense.
All right. There we go. Yeah, so safeguarding elections information using Bitcoin. I'll go start talking about some of the technical details behind it, and then we'll move on to like what actually happened from more the upper level detail. Although I have to start saying that our intro here I think was a little misleading, where if we're going to talk about what is open timestamps, well, first of all, it's basically carbon dating for data. And carbon dating, of course, is the way archaeologists go figure out, well, how old is something? You go and put something through a bunch of fancy tech, and it tells you how much carbon-14 there is, and a bunch of science behind it. But effectively, it's how old was that thing? When was it created? Well, the equivalent for data is to go prove that data existed in the past. And by exist in the past, it's really a proof of saying data existed before some point in the past. Now you might go ask, well, why is this all useful? Well, that's a time machine, and the bad guys don't have one. In fact, no one has one, I'm pretty sure. But since the bad guys don't have one, if we can go show that some data existed prior to some point where it might have been compromised, that's very good evidence that the data is still correct. A good example of this is in Bitcoin Core itself, where we go sign Git commits as well as software releases with keys, like PGP keys, but those keys themselves might be compromised. Well, if you have timestamps on top of those keys, which we also do, if you know roughly when that compromise happened, you can say, well, this particular software release, this particular piece of source code, was still unmodified, was still untampered. Because even though part of our security is broken down, if we know when it broke down, we can rule out attacks because we know data existed prior to that breakdown. And the way this works really comes down to what I call commitment operations. It's a proof that one message existed prior to another message. And, my longer version of this talk with let's talk about elections, I can go into some more detail. But I think the important thing to understand is, well, first of all, hash functions are commitment operations, because no one can find a digest that matches an arbitrary message. So there's kind of this one-way nature of it, right, with time. And open timestamps uses hash functions and Merkle trees and all the standard scaling things in Bitcoin to link messages to Bitcoin blocks in a way that's very scalable and very cheap. And this is where I kind of got to contradict our lovely intro. Open timestamps is not about putting data in the Bitcoin blockchain. In fact, the entire world's data can be timestamped with one single Bitcoin transaction. And in theory, that Bitcoin transaction doesn't even need to be created for the purpose of timestamping. for technical reasons, we don't implement that. But important thing to realize, this is not about ordinals. This has nothing to do about putting data in the chain. It's about leveraging math to prove that data existed prior to the chain. And the beauty of it is open timestamps is a free-to-use protocol. It's open source, as decentralized as we can get it. And anyone can timestamp anything for essentially zero cost. In fact, it's so easy to use that these guys went and called me up, 2 months prior to the Guatemala election, asking, oh, by the way, there's like 3 little things we want you to go fix in open timestamps. Oh, and you want to go hear what we're doing with it? Yeah, well, we've already got all this software written, and it's going to do all this wonderful stuff. Yeah, you just come to Guatemala soon. Well, it'll be great fun. So with that, maybe you want to talk about, well, what did you do with open timestamps?
Thank you, Peter. So so my name is Rafa Cordon. I'm CEO at Simple Proof. We are a company focused on upholding information integrity. We discovered Peter's invention, the open timestamps protocol, back in 2019. And we were able to build on it, build an application on top of this protocol, which we call Simple Proof. And the first time it's ever been used, and we used it, the government of Guatemala used it in an official manner for the Guatemalan elections to safeguard all the vote tally sheets. The elections happened last June and August. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what why we used open timestamps and what we were able to build on top of it. And the thing is that every day it becomes easier to generate fake information that appears real. Just in the last year, with all the AI tools, we see that it's relatively easy to generate fake information. For example, this author, she found a lot of books written under her name on Amazon, which turns out that somebody fed her books into ChatGPT, generated a new book, and then published it on Amazon. Fake scientific abstracts are being written by ChatGPT. Some lawyers submitted fake jurisprudence generated by ChatGPT in a trial. Things like thispersondoesnotexist.com generates fake faces. We saw this thing about pictures coming out of Donald Trump getting arrested, which was not a real thing. This viral thing, Deep Tom Cruise. So we're seeing that it's really easy. It's becoming easier to generate fake information. And if we extrapolate this 10 years, I think it's going to be impossible to tell the difference between real information and fake or AI-generated information. So we need to figure out how to fight this or how to protect the truth. Sam Altman even said this recently in front of the U.S. Senate, that he is concerned about this, and so this is really an issue that is gonna start becoming even more critical, and an important thing that one of the important types of documents that we need to protect are public documents. So something like elections, which everybody cares about. Everybody who cares about democracy, cares about trials, like court documents, copyrights, patents, anything related to IP. And for example, these are the Guatemalan tally sheets, the Guatemalan election tally sheets from the previous election. I took one of them and I fed it into DALL-E, this image generation system, and I asked it to change a couple votes. And so if you see here, it looks like it's handwritten. It even looks like kind of sketched out handwritten. So how can we tell which vote tally sheet is real? And so when we were speaking to the Guatemalan authorities, what we said is somebody's going to come with a document that was altered after the elections and say, hey, you are committing fraud. This is fake. This is the real. I have the real document. You used a fake, fraudulent document. How are you going to be able to protect yourself and say, oh, the document that was used to calculate the final votes was generated at a certain point in time? So I like to say, mention this quote: "The health of democracies, whatever the type and degree, depends on a miserable technical detail, the electoral procedure. Everything else is secondary. Without the support of authentic suffrage, the democratic institutions are up in the air. And so we chose, for simple proof, we chose elections as a first use case because it's information that everyone cares about, that is very important to, the legitimacy of institutions, of, government institutions. And we see what happens when election results are questioned, right? And it's becoming a trend all over the world. It even happened in Guatemala, right? So the loser says that there was fraud always. I don't know if there's, who's the loser, or, I have no way to judge this, but definitely it's becoming a trend. And so being able to safeguard the integrity of information is more critical each time. So we know that a vast amount of digital documents are produced and loaded into these black boxes where they're processed, analyzed, and published. But how can I be certain that documents have not been altered after a certain point in time? And so that's where we help the government of Guatemala do safeguard these the 125,000 vote tally sheets using simple proof, which is based on Peter's invention, open timestamps. I highly recommend folks checking out film.simpleproof.com. We've made a 15-minute documentary which goes into detail about the situation in Guatemala and what's sort of unfolding, more context around just the solution that we built. And so what is simple proof? Well, we enable anyone to independently verify whether digital documents have been altered through our application. It's easy to integrate and scale with existing document management systems, and we also replicate data on premise. So for example, the government integrated this with an existing system. We didn't replace a new system, we just plugged into the current system that they had, and they also have the data on premise. So they have the data in their data centers. It's based on open protocols, of course, open timestamps, and what's most powerful here is that we are leveraging the most resilient digital system ever created. So people, I sometimes get questions like, why did you choose Bitcoin, and why, like, what's the justification for using Bitcoin? Well, if we want to provide transparency and certainty, which is the most transparent, certain, and resilient system ever created. Bitcoin has been around for a lot of years, and it is definitely the most, what better solution can we find other than Bitcoin?
A funny story with that is someone at one point did try to run, an open timestamps calendar timestamping thing with Ethereum, and they gave up because Ethereum nodes kept on going down, whereas Bitcoin nodes just work.
Yeah, so Bitcoin is the most secure system. Why use anything else, right? So this is a picture of the actual sort of opening ceremony in the elections. These are the magistrates of the Guatemalan Elections Tribunal, and up here they have simple proof. So they're showing it. It's sort of become embedded in the ceremony of the elections. We had a lot of fun there. Peter came down to Guatemala, and after the elections, well, the Organization of American States actually looked at what we were doing, and they gave a positive review. Saying that the use of blockchain technology helped to preserve the inalterability of tally sheets, which was the mission of this project, and it's already been used to disprove some claims of fraud. For example, a political party that lost the presidential election, came out with an altered or an untrue. Screen capture of the simple proof verification page, and they were quickly disproven on social media. So people started saying, they went to the actual page and checked the simple proof, the open timestamps proof, and refuted this fraud claim. So it's already been used to refute these claims of fraud. Hopefully it'll be more useful in the future as well. So yeah, that's it. Any questions?
blockchain, but where do you store the data?
Well, so the idea behind open timestamps is if you want to go scale timestamping, obviously you can't go use one transaction per document. You know, in the example of the Guatemala election, we had what, like 100,000, 150,000 tally sheets that were timestamped.
Within a period of 6 hours.
Yeah, and you know, obviously we can't put all that on the Bitcoin chain, or you're going to use up all the capacity, and we're going to spend $500,000 doing it. So instead, Merkle trees are created, and you know, in my longer version of the talk, I go into detail about more how. But long story short is, the open timestamps infrastructure gets to the point where just one single 32-byte digest needs to be somehow committed in a Bitcoin transaction. And the particular way it does it right now is it just creates an op return, and the documents themselves are then stored by the person who's trying to go timestamp something. In the case of simple proof, you know, basically that works, you know, that ended up being a copy on Amazon S3, and then mathematical proofs are stored alongside the documents leading up to the Bitcoin chain. So when I, you know, for instance, if I want to go prove something to you about a document in the election, I'd give you the document, I'd also give you the math proof, and then you can independently verify that all the way to the Bitcoin blockchain.
Got it. So it's from data you can see it have been hashed on chain, but not the other way around.
Exactly, yeah. Because basically none of the data ends up on the chain. Looking at the chain itself, you have no idea what's happening. But I can give you that math proof to prove to you, hey, this claim I made about this document is true.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, so the way Peter you know, invented and implemented the protocol, it generates the Merkle tree, and so the open timestamps gives you back the proofs as a file, and so that proof helps you find the hash in the blockchain. So you know, any person who goes to check the simple proof verification page, they can see the original document and download the open timestamps proof.
So as fees go up, will you be able to ultimately push this onto Lightning, or because it seems like at a certain point you won't be able to push anything onto the...
Well, the key thing is that the entire world's documents only need one Bitcoin transaction. So, you know, as an example, I think the highest fees have been while open timestamps was in existence is probably like $5 a transaction. Now, obviously, $5 a transaction for each document is ridiculous, but $5 a transaction split across the entire world's documents, I mean, that's not really a big deal. I can easily fund that out of pocket. You know, I mean, if you're doing a, you know, timestamp like once a day, well, 5 times 30 is 150 a month. That's not that much money. And, you know, in particular case for simple proof, we did have a need to try to timestamp with as good resolution as possible. So they donated money to the calendars to just timestamp every block. But again, even every block, you know, 144 blocks per day, I mean, it's the kind of money that is not that hard to raise.
Yeah, we had to increase the frequency just because we wanted to capture the proof as soon as the document was received. But for this use case, protecting democracy, I think, you know, the costs are worth it.
Yeah, I'll point out, like most use cases of open timestamps, you know, even knowing roughly to the month that a document was created tends to be enough, because you tend to be looking at historical documents, often protected by things like private keys, where, you know, all you really care about is that it was created, say, a year ago, and a compromise was, say, 6 months ago. In this particular case, you know, we really did care, like, hey, you know, polling closed at this exact minute. We want to know that documents were created like roughly within the hour, or preferably better. And certainly in the future, open timestamps will add more support to get even more fine-grained timestamps.
I have a comment. Thank you. I think it's a good idea to make it clear that it is a democratic process, but it's not democracies what we are defending here. It's at least in El Salvador and Guatemala we have republics, and it's we're using a democratic process through our elections, but we are defending the republics. Yeah. Thank you.
I mean, I think the way I would describe it is what the role of open timestamps in all this is defending the truth. And sometimes the truth may not be what people want, sometimes it is, but this is ultimately math proofs going back to Bitcoin, and what is true or what is not true, that is how the math will play out. If your document existed before this block, that is what open timestamps can prove, and if you don't like that fact, well, tough luck.
I feel there's still some trust involved here because it's that you can have like 3 million ballets, but simple proof high 1 million and only put 2 million on chain because it's like from this design is that if you want to really replay all the counting process, you have to trust simple proof have all the records in it.
Well,
am I correct?
I mean, I think you've hit on like one of the limitations of this approach, which is open timestamps proves that data exists in the past, but it doesn't prove what the set of data should have been. And one of my suggestions to simple proof early on was, well, a better way to go do this would be stick everything in a big Git repository. So at least you'd make the claim of, well, the full set of votes tally sheets is this, not just like an individual one. But obviously it takes time to implement stuff, and I'm sure in the future these kind of more advanced refinements will be implemented. And I think you can attest to how institutions are a big thing, and there's limits to what you can go do in one go. And all the software can get refined in the next iteration, and so on.
Yeah, that was a sort of a design trade-off in that sense, because we wanted to sort of empower individuals to be able to prove it for themselves. So anybody can go on the official government results website and see a specific document and download the open timestamps proof and check for themselves against any other implementation of open timestamp. They don't have to trust our company. They don't have to trust the government. They can just verify for themselves. Yeah. So it's a design trade-off, but I think we can.
I think certainly in the future, better software will exist. Good example being in the future, it'd be nice if Guatemala and election authority could, publish that Git repo, and anyone could just download the full set of relevant documents for themselves. But that'll take time.
Thank you. As a Guatemalan and Salvadoran myself, I would like to follow up on my philosophical comment, because the most powerful nation in the world is also a republic. The United States is a republic, and there's a misconception. If we're looking for truth, the truth is that it's not a democracy, it's a republic, and we're using a democratic process. Democracy means the rule of the mob. And if we want to correlate this with Bitcoin, Bitcoin is truth, and it's given the power to each individual, not to a mob. So let's take this into consideration. Thank you.
Well, again, I'm here to implement software that proves things but the truth, and if people choose to run an election, well, I can help them go prove that the election ran in a certain way. Whether or not you want to run an election that way, well, that's up to you.
Hello. I hear there are elections on February 4th, both in El Salvador and Costa Rica. Do you think you have enough time to implement this for those elections?
The implementation process is pretty straightforward. So yeah, if there is interest and a will to do it in El Salvador, definitely it can be done.
It's embarrassing enough that El Salvador can only be second now. I mean, it'll be even more embarrassing if they're third or fourth or fifth. Well, I think we're good then. No more questions? Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.